Hey guys, tonight we begin with a soft drink, clear, bubbly, cheerful, and mildly laced with a psychiatric mood stabilizer. You're in 1929, a year when the stock market is doing somersaults. Everyone's anxious, and apparently the solution is to give your children carbonated lithium and call it refreshing. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is 7-Up, the original formula. For over 20 years, America casually dosed itself with a substance now locked in pharmacy safes, and nobody batted an eyelash, mostly because they were too calm to care. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You open your eyes in 1929 and it smells like dust and nickel, the kind of air that clings to your coat and makes your teeth feel slightly dry. Outside, men in fedoras move like tired clock hands, slow and repetitive, always in search of something money, meaning lunch. You're sitting on a bar stool at the corner soda counter, elbows sticking faintly to the polished wood, watching a row of glass bottles catch the morning light like little sermons. The boy next to you is swirling his straw in circles, eyes vacant. He's about 8, maybe 9. He hasn't spoken in 10 minutes. His mother sits 2 stools down, staring ahead like she's rehearsing a conversation she'll never have. Behind the counter, a young man with a paper hat smiles the sort of smile people wear when they've stopped asking questions. He reaches under the marble and places a cold bottle in front of you. It's green, clean, and vaguely hopeful. It's called Bib Label Lithiated Lemon Lime Soda, which sounds less like a drink and more like something your uncle might be prescribed for episodes. You pause. There's a small hiss as you twist the cap, a polite release of pressure like the bottle is exhaling after a long day. You take a sip, and something unexplainable clicks in your bloodstream. It tastes like citrus and static. Not too sweet, not too sour, just enough to distract you from the existential weight of existing in 1929. It doesn't happen all at once, but within 5 minutes, your thoughts start to round off. The corners get soft, the awkward little stabs of daily life, late rent, disapproving in-laws, the unspoken dread that maybe this country has already peaked, fade to a tolerable hum. It's not euphoria. It's something gentler, like background music, played just loud enough to drown out the noise in your head. You glance around. No one else seems alarmed. A teenager leans against the wall, lazily sipping from the same green bottle, like it's just another soda. A man in a wool vest lights a cigarette and grins without making eye contact. Even the boy beside you has stopped stirring his straw. He's just sitting now, legs swinging calmly, blinking with the slow rhythm of someone being quietly soothed from the inside out. It's a strange kind of peace, and you don't know where it came from until you read the label again. Lithiated, a word that doesn't mean much to you yet, but feels suspiciously scientific, like something you'd find in a doctor's handwriting or a chemistry book that smells like mildew. You ask the paper-hatted soda clerk what it means. He shrugs. Makes the nerves behave, he says, and walks away. You take another sip. The flavor lingers, clean and medicinal, but not unpleasant. It's like drinking order, like drinking the absence of chaos. And the wild part? No one's hiding it. This isn't a backroom tonic or a whispered cure-all from your aunt's prayer group. It's being sold out in the open, 3 cents a bottle, right next to the cherry phosphate and root beer. As the hour drips forward, you begin to notice it everywhere. Bottles tucked into purses, stacked in windows, chilled in ice beside the milk. Mothers hand them to children the way you'd pass a towel after a bath. Men drink them during poker games. Clerks sip them between customers. It's as if the entire country has agreed, silently and without debate, that a mild psychiatric sedative in soda form is exactly what the times require. No one's panicking. No one's asking if this is safe. You hear a man mutter that it takes the edge off, and someone else laughs like that's the whole point. And you realize this isn't some accidental health craze. This is a mood, a movement, a very carbonated mental shift. You should probably feel concerned, but the truth is, you just feel better. Like whatever knot's been living behind your ribs is finally learning how to untie itself. You sit up straighter. Your thoughts slow down enough to be friendly again. And as you watch the sunlight shimmer through a row of green bottles, you think, not for the first time, that maybe the world isn't such a sharp place after all. Maybe it just needed a little lemon, a little lime, and a touch of lithium. Charles Leiper Grigg is not what you'd call a scientist. He doesn't wear goggles or scribble equations onto napkins. He doesn't mutter about molecules or run experiments on unfortunate frogs. He wears a tie that's always just a bit too tight and spends most of his energy thinking about thirst. Not biology, not chemistry, not ethics. Just thirst and how to bottle something that could make people forget they were ever thirsty in the first place. You meet him in a bottling plant outside street. Louis, it smells like syrup and ambition. There's a dull roar of machinery in the background, and Charles is hunched over a steel vat, pouring something viscous from a dark bottle with the slow, meditative calm of a priest. His hair is slicked back with the confidence of a man who hasn't doubted himself in a while, possibly ever. He hums while he works, something tuneless and content. He isn't hiding what he's doing, which is the strangest part. There's a crate of lithium citrate sitting beside the lemon extract. He reads the label like he's picking out spices for soup. It's not a secret formula, it's more of a casual suggestion from the universe that maybe citrus and psychiatric medication were always meant to be together. You ask him why lithium. He doesn't blink. Because it works, he says, as if that's the only explanation necessary. And maybe it is. He tells you people need to feel better, that they're tired, itchy in their own skin, full of bad thoughts with nowhere to go. Then he gestures to the vat like a magician revealing a dove. This, he says, makes them manageable. There's no medical degree on the wall, no letters after his name, just a filing cabinet full of ad copy and a handwritten note that says, 7 flavors tested, number 7 wins. He called it 7 Up eventually, but before that, it was bib label, lithiated lemon lime soda, a name that reads like a dare. It sounds like something that should come with a warning label or a sermon, but Charles thinks it sounds refreshing. You're not sure whether to admire his courage or question his grip on reality. He talks about branding like other men talk about war. There's a seriousness to it, a sense of mission. He believes in the power of words, in bubbles, in the way something can taste clean and still reach deep into the chemical machinery of the mind. He tells you that if it sparkles and makes people feel better, no one cares what's in it. They won't read the fine print. They won't ask about the long-term effects. They'll just smile a little easier and buy another bottle. You watch as he hands a freshly capped one to a young woman in the factory. She takes a sip, sighs in a way that suggests 2 decades of marital frustration just evaporated, and returns to work with eerie serenity. Charles nods to himself, like a painter watching his first stroke dry. Then he writes down a tagline. It lifts your spirits. Underlines it twice. There's something unsettling about how calm he is, not in a sinister way, just overly certain, like he's figured something out, and the rest of the world hasn't caught up. He doesn't think he's selling medicine, he thinks he's selling happiness. And happiness, according to Charles, should fizz. You notice that he never drinks it himself. He tastes it, sure adjusts the ratios, checks for consistency, but he doesn't lean back and enjoy it the way his customers do. You ask him why, and he smiles without humor. "Because I already know what's in it," he says. You leave the plant with the distinct feeling that you've just witnessed the birth of something you'll still be unpacking 50 years from now. He didn't mean to start a chemical movement. He just wanted a good soda. But somewhere along the line, Charles Grigg stopped mixing flavors and started mixing moods. And nobody tried to stop him. Not the health board. Not the doctors. Not the parents handing bottles to their children. You sip another bottle on the walk home. The air feels less sharp. Your shoulders loosen. A man passes you and tips his hat with a rare smile. For a moment, the world feels like it's been gently realigned. And somewhere, Charles is already thinking about the next batch. You learn what lithium is the same way people in the 1,920 seconds learn most things slowly, vaguely, and with the misplaced confidence of a country that just discovered sliced bread. It starts with a word on the bottle that sounds like a made-up element from a science fiction novel. Lithiated. You assume it means fizzy, maybe lemon adjacent. Something refreshing and scientific enough to sound trustworthy, but not important enough to question. Then someone hands you a pamphlet, the kind printed in ink that smudges slightly if your fingers are damp. It's titled "The Therapeutic Potential of Lithium Salts," and it reads like a bedtime story for pharmacists. According to the fine print, lithium is a naturally occurring element found in mineral springs, granite, and apparently, now, the soda aisle. It has no color, no flavor, and no reason to be in your drink unless you're trying to treat something specific like acute mania, or being a little too awake all the time. You pause, reread that part. Mania. You're not entirely sure what mania is, but it sounds serious, like something that happens to poets who write too fast, or men who invent 6 appliances before breakfast. And now, you're drinking the thing used to calm those people down. It doesn't alarm you, exactly. It's more like learning that your pillow used to be prescribed to war veterans. Comforting, but suddenly complicated. You sit with it for a while. Sip again. The bubbles seem gentler now. You can't tell if the soda's working or if you just believe it's working, but either way, your anxiety starts folding itself into a neat square. It's hard to feel disturbed when you're drinking a federally unregulated emotional coolant. At some point you realize lithium isn't even new. People have been soaking in lithium-rich hot springs for centuries, bathing in calm, swallowing it in small doses, long before modern science showed up with clipboards and liability forms. In fact, there was a whole town in Texas that put lithium in their water and reported fewer crimes, fewer divorces, and generally fewer outbursts. You picture a town full of people who all speak slowly and nod a lot. It doesn't sound terrible. Still, the idea that it's now in your soda, sold at corner stores by 12-year-olds in paper hats, feels like a detail that should concern someone. You ask around, trying to detect alarm in the faces of the people pouring it into glasses. Nothing. No one's worried. No one's checking dosages. It's just another ingredient, listed right there between carbonated water and natural flavors, which is a phrase that legally means nothing but emotionally feels safe. You go to the library, hoping for a bit more context, and find a medical text from the late 1800s. It describes lithium as useful for curing gout, banishing melancholy, and restoring the moral order of the nervous system. You have no idea what that last part means, but it sounds like something your grandmother would approve of. She always said people were nervous when they cried at movies or talked too fast. Maybe this is what she meant. Maybe the soda is just a shortcut to the part of you that stops reacting so much. Eventually, you meet a man at a diner who swears it saved his marriage, says he used to wake up angry and go to bed angrier. Now he drinks 3 bottles a day and hasn't yelled at the radio in months. You ask if he thinks it's safe. He shrugs. Safe enough, he says, and refills his glass. The truth is, you don't feel bad. You feel tolerable, level, like your thoughts are walking in a straight line for once, instead of tripping over themselves on the way to the next worry. It's not happiness exactly, but it's something that looks close enough from a distance. And that's the strangest part. The more you learn about lithium, the less you know what to do with the knowledge. You understand it's a mood stabilizer. You understand it's mined from rocks. You understand that a man named Charles thought it would make a good mixer. But none of that changes the fact that you feel a little less like screaming into the sky when you drink it. You think maybe that's what America needed in 1929, not a new president or a new economic model, but just a little chemical silence, a sip of peace, a mineral pause. And so you take another drink. You're still concerned, of course, but not enough to stop. You drink it because everyone else is drinking it, because the bottle is cold and the cap makes a satisfying hiss when twisted open, because the sun is high and your patience is low, and this strange green liquid seems to be the closest thing to an emotion you can afford right now. It's lemon lime, supposedly, but it tastes like something more complex, something between a memory and a prescription. The fizz feels sharper than you expect, not harsh, just attentive. It doesn't sting, it leans in. The bubbles coat your mouth like they're trying to tell you a secret in Morse code. You swallow, and the sensation keeps going, down your throat, through your chest, like a line of polite electricity taking attendance inside your body. You brace for sweetness, or tartness, or some kind of aggressive artificial cheer. But instead, you get quiet, not silence. That would be suspicious. This is quieter, internal, like the volume knob on your nervous system just slipped backward a few notches. You notice your jaw isn't clenched anymore. Your shoulders feel less like they're bracing for impact and more like they just came back from vacation. You blink slower. You feel present, in your skin, and not even in a mystical way, just calmly, weirdly here. Around you, the world doesn't change. The traffic still groans, a man still curses at a newspaper, a child still whines about raisins, but your reaction to all of it shifts. It's not that you don't care, you just care less loudly. You're watching life happen with the emotional investment of someone half asleep on a train. It's not apathy, it's distance, comfortable, padded distance. You look at the bottle again, half expecting it to wink at you. Bib label lithiated, lemon lime soda. It should not taste like therapy. It should not feel like a weighted blanket in beverage form. And yet, here you are less angry, less worried, slightly more okay with the state of your shoes. The quiet doesn't stop at your thoughts. It moves into your habits. You don't check your watch 5 times. You don't rehearse a conversation with your boss in your head until your brain feels like a courtroom. You just sit in a chair, and that's enough. It occurs to you that maybe this is what normal feels like. Maybe all those years of snapping pencils and grinding teeth weren't a personality. Maybe they were symptoms. And maybe this soda, of all things, is the medicine. You sip again, just to be sure. There's no euphoric rush, no jittery thrill, no sparkle behind your eyes. That's what makes it unsettling. Most things that change how you feel come with a price tag of obviousness, sugar highs, caffeine buzzes, late-night declarations of sudden clarity. This doesn't do any of that. It doesn't want attention. It just wants you to stop yelling internally for 5 minutes. You notice the old man 2 stools down. He's drinking the same thing. He looks calm. His hand, resting on the counter, doesn't twitch. You wonder how many bottles he's had, how many he'll need. You wonder if this is how dependency begins, not with a craving, but with a quiet you don't want to lose. A woman walks in, asks for 3 bottles, 1 for her, 2 for her children. She says this without irony, like it's orange juice, like it's part of breakfast. The soda jerk smiles, hands them over, and nobody says a word about the lithium. Nobody flinches. Nobody questions why a mood-stabilizing substance is being handed out like candy. It's just the way things are now. You drink the last sip and realize you haven't worried about anything for a full 10 minutes. That's longer than you've gone in years. You'd be concerned, but you're not. You're fine. You're better than fine. You walk outside and the air feels less rude. You see a pigeon and you don't hate it. You step in a puddle and just keep walking. You've been chemically softened and it doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like relief. And you don't even care that a soda just fixed your personality. You're not alone. That becomes clear somewhere between your 3rd bottle and the day you notice it sitting in the church vestibule next to the collection tray. Same green glass, same polite fizz, just a little offering for the soul and the nervous system. The priest doesn't mention it. He takes a sip before the sermon and delivers the homily with an unusual sense of emotional equilibrium. The shift happens quietly. No mass announcement, no billboard that says, "Now with mood control." It just begins. People drink it. Then more people drink it. Then those people tell their friends that they're sleeping better, snapping less, thinking more, clearly, or at the very least, not crying in hardware stores. The drink spreads like gossip, except the kind that makes you less likely to throw a chair. You see it at barbershops, gas stations, beauty parlors, in school lunch pails, in glove compartments, tucked into the pockets of nurses and accountants and postmen who smile a little too easily now. It's everywhere, and no one's alarmed. If anything, people seem relieved. They call it crisp. They call it clean. They call it refreshing. Like the word itself is a euphemism for functioning emotional regulation. Kids stop throwing tantrums in department stores. Teachers notice students sitting still without being asked twice. No one connects the dots out loud, but the look in their eyes says everything. This soda might be magic. Housewives go through 3 bottles before 2 p.m., and suddenly the house is clean, the dinner is planned, and the existential dread has been folded into the linen closet. You sit at a park bench and watch it unfold. A man with a barking dog pulls a 7 up from his coat and takes a long drink. The dog stops barking. You can't explain that part, but it happens. Across the street, a woman pauses in the middle of what appears to be a very messy breakup, unscrews the cap on a bottle, takes a sip, and calmly returns her engagement ring like she's handing back a library book. The ad men are already circling. You can smell the slogans cooking. Takes the ouch out of your grouch. Refreshes in more ways than one. They print full-page spreads with smiling children and suspiciously relaxed-looking fathers, all gathered around the table like a Norman Rockwell painting designed by a pharmacist. The marketing isn't subtle. It doesn't have to be. Everyone's in on the joke, except no one's laughing, because they're all too fine. You overhear a man say he drinks it before sales calls because it keeps his voice smooth and his thoughts orderly. A nurse says the hospital started, keeping it in the break room. A grocer claims it cured his migraines. No one seems to question the part where it was originally designed to treat manic episodes. That part is either forgotten or quietly ignored, like the friend who always shows up with suspicious bruises and vague excuses. The country starts to change shape. Not dramatically, but perceptibly. Edges soften, tempers fade. Even crime, in some towns, dips slightly. Nothing significant enough for headlines, just enough for neighbors to nod a little more often. The phrase, "I'm fine," becomes slightly more believable. You wonder how long it will last, whether the mood will hold, or if the collective calm will crack like a windshield under pressure. But no one else seems worried. The government doesn't say a word. The newspapers don't dig. The soda company's only concern is keeping up with demand. They open new factories, hire new drivers, crank out crate after crate of fizzy compliance. You picture a nation quietly numbing itself, one 3-cent bottle at a time, and you try to feel unsettled. You don't. You just feel better. So does everyone else. And that, somehow, is the strangest part. You flip through the magazine half out of habit, half out of dread. The pages smell like ink and closet air, and the ads are louder than the articles. One shouts, takes the ouch out of your grouch, in blocky red letters, pasted beneath the image of a man who looks suspiciously like he just found religion in a lemon. He's mid-sip, eyes closed, with a facial expression that lands somewhere between satisfied and spiritually tranquilized. His tie is perfectly centered. His teeth are suspiciously white. The whole thing feels vaguely sinister, but no one around you seems to notice. You turn the page. There's a full-color ad of a child, maybe 7, smiling directly at the camera with the kind of eerie calm that only happens when someone's been bribed or medicated. He's holding a 7-Up bottle like it's a toy, fingers wrapped around the neck like he's done it 1,000 times. The caption underneath says, "For that fussy hour before bedtime." The subtext screams louder than the headline. Why wrestle with your child's emotions when you can carbonate them into submission? You blink slowly. The next ad features a woman reclining on a divan, one hand resting on her stomach, the other delicately holding a sweating bottle of 7, up like it's a love letter. Her makeup is perfect. Her smile is soft. Her eyes have the distant, glossy quality of someone who hasn't felt strongly about anything in 6 to 8 hours. Guaranteed to lift the blues, the copy promises. Beneath it, a footnote reads, also effective for mild hysteria, general irritability, and social embarrassment. You're not sure whether to laugh or leave the room. The language is brazen, but that's what sells. These aren't metaphors. They're instructions. The ads don't flirt with the truth. They sit down next to it and yell in its ear. There's one with a pharmacist pointing at the bottle like it's the answer to every unspeakable question. One with a tired housewife surrounded by 5 children, her hair still pinned neatly in place, smiling with a bottle in hand like she's discovered the missing page of the Bible. And then there's the one that simply says, soothes minds, settles nerves, cheers the soul. You close the magazine, but you can still see the ads burned into the back of your eyelids. You wonder how many people bought the drink because they genuinely liked the taste, and how many bought it because they didn't like themselves. You think about all the children sipping lithium-infused soda between games of hopscotch, all the fathers quietly pacified before dinner, all the mothers smiling into the sink as the dishes rinse away whatever anxiety they're not allowed to name. There's a sort of collective trance to it all, a national lullaby, bottled and sold in 6-packs. And the advertising is just the chorus, catchy, repetitive, a little too effective. No one questions the dosage. No one checks the label. You're not even sure if the label says anything at all. It's just green glass and the promise of a better afternoon. You walk past a corner drugstore and see a sandwich board out front. Feeling off? Pop a top. 7. Up knows best. You're beginning to wonder if the soda's smarter than the people drinking it. Not because it changes them, because it knows they want to be changed. Calm is the product. Convenience is the vehicle. And the ads? The ads are a wink, a nod, a gentle pat on the back that says, hey, it's okay to sedate your feelings as long as it tastes good. And it does taste good. That's the problem. You sit down with another bottle. It sweats in your hand, the glass warm from the sun. You think about that kid in the magazine, holding his bottle like a pacifier. You picture yourself in the same pose. You take a sip, and the worry curls back into its drawer. The magazine is still on your lap. You flip it open again, slowly this time, not because you're looking for more, but because you know exactly what you'll find. The next ad reads, more than a drink, it's a feeling. You already knew that. The stock market dies on a Tuesday. You don't hear a crash so much as a collective shrug from Wall Street. Men in suits lean out of windows and contemplate gravity. Paper floods the streets. Somewhere, Someone tries to trade a typewriter for a sack of flour and gets punched for optimism. The country spirals, but you don't, because in your hand is a cold bottle of 7-Up, and your bottle doesn't know what the Dow is. The banks close. You line up with the others and hand over your last dollar for a loaf of bread that tastes like despair and sawdust. But afterward, you sit on a curb, uncork your green glass miracle, and take a sip. It's bubbly. It's medicinal. It's lemon-lime flavored apathy in liquid form, and it hugs the inside of your rib cage like it was made just for your nervous system. Everyone around you looks worried. You look adjusted. The newspapers shout about suicides and soup kitchens. Your neighbor's brother tries to sell his wedding ring and comes back with a can of beans and a new personality. You hear whispers of Hoovervilles popping up like mushrooms after rain tents, fires, wet socks drying on sticks. You're aware of all of it, cognitively, but not emotionally. The Lithium keeps the volume low. You still lose your job. The factory closes with a creak and a whimper. Your boss delivers the news with a hand on your shoulder, eyes wet, voice shaking. You nod slowly, thank him for the opportunity, and walk out without breaking pace. Your hands don't tremble. Your breath stays even. You stop by the corner store and buy another bottle with what little you have left. Priorities. At home, you eat quietly and count coins like they're puzzle pieces. Your stomach growls. Your fingers are cold. But your brain is smooth, rounded at the edges. No jagged spirals of panic. No 3 a.m. bargaining sessions with the ceiling. Just you and your soda, coexisting like two people who've decided not to fight anymore. Your friend Sam used to scream about the economy. Now he drinks 2 bottles a day and writes poetry about tree bark. His wife says he hasn't thrown a chair in weeks. The kids call it the calm juice and beg for sips between chores. One of them once fell off a porch, skinned both knees, stood up, and asked for a 7-Up before he cried. He didn't cry, just limped inside and sat down like an old man who had seen things. It's not happiness. No one is happy, but it's something just adjacent to functional. The world has cracked in half, but your internal weather report reads, mild with scattered indifference. The government tries to reassure everyone with programs and parades. You nod, politely, but it's not the WPA that steadies your hand. It's the Lithium, that slow, deliberate softening that turns national collapse into a minor inconvenience. You still worry, of course. You still miss money. You still flinch when your landlord knocks. But your panic runs through molasses now. It tries to reach you and slips instead. You meet a woman in the bread line. She's got that same faraway calm in her eyes. You share a bottle between you, passing it back and forth like communion. You talk about everything except the crash. She tells you she hasn't had a real meal in days but hasn't cried once. You believe her. She offers you half her potato. You give her the last third of your soda. It's the most romantic thing you've done in months. As the weeks stretch on, something strange happens. You start to think this might be survivable. Not in the bootstraps, grit your teeth sense, but in the quiet, numb resilience of people whose emotions are on a pharmaceutical leash. You wonder how much of the population is still emotionally sober. Probably not many. And honestly, good. Because no matter how bad it gets out there, no matter how long the lines grow or how empty the cupboards become, you've still got one thing that never fails. You twist the cap, hear the hiss, and let the bubbles carry you somewhere lighter. You assume someone's watching, a scientist maybe, or a guy in a clean lab coat with a clipboard and a firm handshake who tastes random bottles and frowns at unacceptable levels of chaos. You imagine an office somewhere in Washington with a big seal on the wall and a row of stern people arguing about milligrams per serving. It comforts you, the idea of oversight. But then you meet the FDA of 1,930, and it's not what you pictured. It's not even technically called the FDA yet, not like it is today. It's still figuring itself out, like a teenager with too many responsibilities and no clear bedtime. The agency was born out of a law that mostly cared about whether your food was poisoned, not whether it was mood-altering. They're concerned about spoiled meat, fake maple syrup, and things that explode in your pantry, not your quietly fizzy descent into emotional apathy. You picture them now, underfunded and overworked, pushing paper and hoping no one notices the panic behind their eyes. They don't have the power to demand tests. They don't have authority over advertising. They can't even make companies list ingredients in a way that makes sense. They can suggest, they can recommend. But enforcement? That's a fantasy. You watch a man walk into the FDA's office with a suitcase full of soda samples and a grin that says, "You're not going to stop me." And he's right. They squint at the label lithiated lemon lime soda and nod like they've seen worse. One man raises a hand, as if to ask a question, then lowers it again when he remembers it's Friday and he'd like to go home, emotionally intact. There's no testing protocol, no standardized lithium limit. The amount per bottle depends on how generous the guy in the mixing room is feeling that day. Some bottles are mild. Some bottles could probably stop a small riot. You drink one and feel like you've been gently erased from your own stress. But the FDA? They're still trying to figure out whether ketchup counts as a vegetable. You start reading the newspapers more closely, searching for outrage. There isn't any. No editorials, no exposés, no congressional hearings where someone shouts, "But think of the children." Everyone's too busy not starving, or drinking it themselves, or calmly applauding the fact that their neighbors have stopped arguing about fences and started smiling at clouds. You imagine trying to explain your concern to an official. "Excuse me, there's lithium in the soda." And he'd nod politely and say, "Yes, but does it taste good?" You'd say, "It's chemically altering people's moods." He'd reply, "Right. And that's a bad thing?" You'd sputter something about ethics and public safety and long-term effects, and he'd blink slowly and say, "Have you seen this economy?" You try not to think about how many children are drinking it. You try not to think about your neighbor's baby, who now falls asleep mid-cry like someone pulled his emotional plug. You try not to think about the fact that the people who are supposed to protect you are currently spending more energy on defining butter than regulating neuroactive minerals in lunchbox drinks. The FDA eventually issues something guidance, suggestions, hesitant shrugs in official font. But by then, the country has developed a taste for mellow. Regulation is hard when your entire population is emotionally cushioned. So the soda keeps flowing, the lithium keeps fizzing, the labels stay vague, and the agency meant to protect you, they're busy elsewhere, waving politely at danger as it strolls by with a smile and a jingle. You twist open another bottle and wonder how many laws it's quietly breaking. None, apparently. Or at least, none anyone's brave enough to enforce. You take a sip and decide you don't care. Not because it isn't terrifying, but because it's working. You ask a doctor. Not out of panic, just curiosity. The way you might ask if it's okay to eat cake for breakfast, if it has fruit in it. He looks up from a clipboard that appears to be mostly doodles and blinks behind his wire spectacles. He adjusts his monocle not because he needs it, but because it makes him feel decisive and offers a sound that isn't quite a word. Something between and eh. You repeat yourself. There's lithium in the soda, the one everyone's drinking, including the children. Is that normal? He straightens his coat and clears his throat, which you've learned is a stall tactic. He then launches into a vague lecture about tonics, elixirs, and how the human constitution benefits from occasional mineral invigoration. You wait for something concrete, dosage limits, studies, and acknowledgement of long-term effects. But what you get is a small nod and the phrase balanced humors. You think he's joking. He is not. He tells you, with the steady confidence of a man who learned medicine from a 2-week correspondence course and a particularly insightful cow dissection. That lithium is a natural salt, and therefore must be good for you. It's found in springs, you know, he says, sipping something from a brown bottle you strongly suspect is not tea. The ancients believed in mineral waters, quite restorative, calms the nerves, clears the bile. You ask if he's concerned about children consuming a mood-stabilizing agent recreationally. He responds by pulling a peppermint from his coat pocket and offering it to you like that answers the question. You press further. He frowns, slightly, mostly because your tone is starting to sound modern and disrespectful. It's not as if they're injecting arsenic, he says, which is both reassuring and not at all. Would you rather they be screaming in the aisles of a Woolworth's? He gestures vaguely in the direction of society. It's improved public behavior. Mothers report fewer tantrums. Barbers have noted less fidgeting. The minister says attendance is up, and so is tithing. You consider asking about side effects, but the man just shrugs and says, a little drowsiness, perhaps. But wouldn't you rather a drowsy public than a dangerous one? You look around his office. The diploma on the wall is slightly askew. There's a chart labeled Phrenology Zones of the Head pinned above the examination table. A bottle of 7-Up sits on the desk, half empty, next to a stack of patient records and a sandwich that appears to have been forgotten mid-bite. You realize he's probably had 2 today, maybe 3. He seems fine, suspiciously fine, like he's on hour 5 of a really productive days. You leave with more questions than answers and a prescription for fresh air and optimism. Outside, you pass a pharmacy window filled with bottles. Coca wine, heroin, cough syrup, a weight loss tonic containing tapeworm eggs. Next to them, 7-Up glows innocently under the display lights. The words lithiated and lemon lime dancing like a cheerful contradiction. You ask another doctor, just in case. This one says it's less about the soda and more about temperament. He believes modern hysteria is caused by tight corsets and insufficient church attendance. When you mention lithium, he lights a cigar and mutters something about Greeks bathing in springs and how nobody complained back then. Eventually, you stop asking. Not because you have answers, but because no one else seems interested in having them. The doctors aren't worried. The pharmacists are too busy counting sales. And you, well, you're starting to understand the appeal of not knowing. You're drinking the soda again by the week's end, not because you're convinced it's safe, but because the alternative is caring too much in a world where no one else does. And caring, frankly, is exhausting. The first thing you notice is the silence. It's not the peaceful kind, like birdsong or snow. It's more like a heavy blanket has been draped over the nation's toddlers. The screaming that once echoed down supermarket aisles has softened into gentle whimpers and occasional philosophical sighs. A boy drops his lollipop on the sidewalk, and instead of unleashing a howl that could summon demons, he just stares at it like it betrayed him and says, "That was unfortunate." Parents are confused at first. They stand in kitchens holding half-folded laundry, heads cocked, trying to figure out what's missing. And then it hits them. No tantrums, no arguments over bedtime, no dramatic floor flopping over vegetables. Just children processing their emotions. Internally, a woman in Ohio writes a letter to her sister in Pennsylvania. Timmy used to bite furniture when he didn't get his way. Now he just stares into the wallpaper and hums to himself. Her sister writes back, "Lucky. Mine's been organizing his toys by color and muttering about the futility of desire." You see a boy sitting on the steps outside a schoolhouse, clutching a half-empty bottle of 7-Up, watching the wind blow through the trees, with the solemnity of a widowed poet. He doesn't move. He doesn't blink. When you ask what he's thinking, he says, "I'm trying to remember what joy felt like before multiplication tables." And yet, somehow, this is all considered progress. Parents are thrilled. Teachers report that their classrooms are operating at monk-like decibel levels. Participation is down, one admits, but so is property damage. Principals start recommending soda, breaks, instead of recess. It's more effective, and no one falls off the jungle gym. At home, mealtimes have become manageable. Children eat peas without protest. They brush their teeth when asked. One mother claims her daughter thanked her for steamed carrots. No one believes her, but everyone wants to. The newspapers begin referring to the phenomenon as the Great Behavioral Calm. Articles appear with titles like, "Is Your Child Too Good?" "Why That Might Be Fine," and 7-Up, the secret ingredient in your child's newfound compliance. A parenting column suggests adding it to baby formula. Another recommends soaking teething rings in it. Pediatricians pretend to be cautious but casually sip their own bottles while advising moderation. The kids, for their part, don't complain. They don't really do much at all. They sit, they sip, they hum softly. One writes a short story about loneliness in the Dust Bowl and wins a county fair ribbon. He's 6. His parents frame it and whisper about college. The boy later confesses he doesn't remember writing it, but appreciates the praise. You see a group of children playing quietly in the park. No one's screaming. No one's throwing sand. A girl builds a careful tower of pine cones and names it Disappointment. Her mother claps. A boy pushes a toy truck in a perfect circle for 45 minutes, then lies down and stares at the sky like he's waiting for answers. It would be haunting if it weren't so. Peaceful. People stop asking questions. The mood has shifted. Obedience is the new ideal. Emotional numbness is the preferred family value. If a child does throw a fit, it's considered nostalgic. "Oh, look, how vintage," someone says, as a boy in corduroy screams into a pillow. Just like 1928, the soda keeps flowing. The kids keep sipping. Childhood, once a feral mess of noise and chaos, has been gently dissolved in a carbonated bath of lithium and lemon flavoring. And no one seems to mind that the laughter sounds a little slower now. The morning after always comes with a price. Sore feet, vague shame, and the overwhelming urge to lie down on something cold and pretend time doesn't exist. But not anymore. Now, people rise from their questionable decisions and reach not for water or coffee or repentance, but for 7-Up, a bottle in each hand if they're really hurting. You watch a man emerge from a speakeasy with the gait of someone whose brain is 2 steps behind his legs. He cracks open a 7, up on the curb, downs half in one gulp, wipes his mouth, and says, "Much better," like he just reset his soul. Around him, others do the same. The alley smells like gin and denial, but the mood? Practically serene. They call it the gentle morning, as if it's normal to follow bathtub gin with a psychiatric stabilizer, as if calm is the same thing as clarity, but no one questions it. Not really, because the stuff works. It doesn't cure your hangover so much as smother, laying it under a chemical blanket and tell it to take a nap. Nausea fades, heart rate slows, and that existential twitch behind the eyes melts like butter in a frying pan. Bars start keeping crates behind the counter, right next to the bitters and the bad decisions. Bartenders hand out bottles like party favors. No judgment. One for the road, they say, knowing full well the road will be remembered only in fragments. People start building the routine into their night. Drink too much, dance poorly, kiss someone with a mysterious past, then knock back a 7. Up and feel. Not redeemed, but reorganized. You meet a woman who swears by it. "I used to wake up panicking about the things I said," she tells you, sipping delicately. "Now I just wake up and say them again." Her friends nod. They all look impossibly well rested for a group that left a jazz club at 3 a.m. One of them is still wearing a feather boa and the confident smile of someone whose serotonin was recently restructured. You try it yourself. After a night of warm whiskey and bad ideas, You crack a bottle at dawn. The fizz is sharp, the citrus clean, but it's the after effect that stuns you. Your head doesn't throb. Your stomach doesn't lurch. You don't feel good, exactly. But you also don't feel like death would be a mercy. You just feel level, like your internal compass was realigned by a chemical whisper. People stop calling it soda and start calling it my little helper. Some joke that it's breakfast. Others don't joke. Diners begin offering it alongside eggs and toast. One place calls it a sunrise tonic and serves it in frosted mugs. Another mixes it with orange juice and calls it a nervous mimosa. You feel a chill down your spine, but everyone else just clinks glasses and sighs contentedly. You start noticing that no one seems to crash anymore. There are no rough mornings, no spirals, no shame-laced hangovers that turn into personality changes. There's just a steady, low hum of contentment. It's hard to tell if anyone's happy, but no one's miserable, and that seems to be enough. You try bringing it up at a party. You mention the lithium, the actual mood-stabilizing drug that's doing most of the work. Someone laughs. Yeah, but it's natural, they say, like that means anything. Another shrugs. It's not like I'm dependent. I just prefer not to scream into my pillow anymore. You want to argue, but you don't, because deep down, you get it. No one wants to feel like they're hanging on by a thread. No one enjoys waking up with their thoughts scrambled like eggs on a sidewalk. And if a lemon-lime soda with a pharmaceutical secret can offer a detour around that chaos, well, who's really going to say no? You take another sip, and the panic that used to buzz beneath your skin slides quietly out the back door, and you start to understand why no one wants to stop. It starts with whispers in boardrooms, executives in pressed suits sweating into their neckties as they watch sales reports plummet. Cola consumption is down. Root beer is flailing. Even the sarsaparilla lobbyists are getting nervous. The market isn't crashing, it's going numb. Because across the street, 7-Up is not just refreshing anymore. It's medicinal. It's emotional. It's beating depression with bubbles. You're sitting at a lunch counter when you hear a man mutter, "We need a miracle or a mood stabilizer." His colleague responds by ordering 3 egg creams and staring into the middle distance. The realization is settling in. Their sodas make people burp. 7-Up makes people feel less alone. Other companies respond the only way they know how: panic. A cola company decides the answer is more sugar. If the drink can't calm you, maybe it can hype you into forgetting your problems altogether. They double the sweetener and release a new slogan: "You're not sad, you're just not drinking enough." Consumers try it, jitter for an hour, then lie down and cry for reasons they can't explain. A fruit soda brand adds more caffeine. Not just stay awake caffeine, not even study for finals caffeine. This is stare at the wallpaper until it dissolves caffeine. Kids drink it and vibrate into another dimension. One boy builds a radio tower out of Lincoln logs and claims to hear Morse code from Mars. His mother calls it creative focus. Someone else rolls out a drink that tastes vaguely like pineapple but also vaguely like disinfectant. It's called Zizz. It fizzes violently and has an aftertaste like crushed dreams. The label promises instant energy, but the fine print mentions occasional chest confusion. They market it with a cartoon pelican. No one knows why. The pelican looks haunted. Meanwhile, 7-Up sits quietly at the top of the pyramid, glowing like a cult leader who's just discovered branding. They don't yell. They don't need to. Their ads don't promise excitement. They promise equilibrium. A woman in a housecoat smiles peacefully at the camera while her children sit in silent formation behind her, all holding chilled bottles like ceremonial candles. The competition keeps escalating. One company infuses their soda with botanical extracts. It tastes like a garden had an identity crisis. Another tries ginseng and green food coloring, then claims it's ancient wisdom. A third brand just adds glitter, Literal glitter. Sparkle your mood, the ad cries. A girl drinks it and spends the next week sneezing sequins. None of it works, because no matter how flashy the label or how aggressively it buzzes your nervous system, none of these sodas can match the smooth emotional decapitation offered by a lithium bath in citrus form. The public isn't looking for excitement. They're looking for relief. And relief, it turns out, is better carbonated. You watch a taste test at a fair. One cup is syrupy sweet, the other is 7-Up. Man tries both and nods at the second one. This one makes me feel like I'm doing okay, he says. Not great, just okay. The crowd applauds. A nearby child clutches a stuffed bear and whispers, I feel less. Eventually, some competitors try to copy the formula more directly. There are quiet rumors of enhanced tonics and restorative beverages. A few companies begin experimenting with their own trace minerals, but the results are inconsistent. One batch sends a woman into a 3-hour nap she doesn't remember starting. Another makes a man hug a mailbox. Still, the race continues. You get the sense they're all just throwing darts at the periodic table now. What's osmium taste like? Can we carbonate tungsten? Someone jokes about vodka for breakfast and is immediately promoted to vice president of product innovation. But through it all, 7-Up stays calm. It doesn't fight back. It doesn't scream louder. It just keeps doing what it does best, gently sedating the emotional chaos of a generation with a lemon-lime smile and a wink that says, you don't need to feel everything. And for now, that's more than enough. By 1931, the nation feels like it's been dipped in chamomile and sealed in plastic. People still go to work, still raise families, still make awkward small talk at dinner parties, but there's a glaze over everything now, like the country's running on autopilot, and someone forgot to turn the volume back up. You walk through town and notice it. Teachers gently tapping chalk against the board with the energy of a sleep-deprived librarian. Factory workers moving like clockwork, efficient, tireless, blank. Children lined up at the soda fountain, sipping slowly, blinking in unison. Even the local mayor, once known for his aggressive handshakes and loud laughter, now speaks exclusively in nods and soft-hued metaphors about rainfall. At first, you think you're imagining it. Maybe things are just calm, now. Maybe the chaos of the previous decades has finally burned itself out. But then you hear someone drop a bag of groceries and no one flinches. A bottle shatters, a head turns, a long pause, then nothing. Just a quiet collective shrug, and everyone continues on, as if emotional response has been officially suspended. You're in a cafe when you realize it's not just local. The entire country has leveled out. A couple breaks up at the table beside you. The woman says, I think we want different things. The man says, that's fair. They sip their sodas. They leave through separate doors, but at exactly the same time. At the barber shop, a man gets a bad haircut and just smiles softly at the mirror. It's fine, he says, even though it isn't. In the post office, someone cuts in line. No one complains. A woman mutters, we're all on our own journey, and adjusts her purse. You go to a funeral, no tears, just slow nods, and a eulogy delivered like a weather. Report. Someone brings a case of 7 up to the wake. They call it a comfort. It's not that people don't feel anymore, they just don't seem to mind. The edges are gone. The highs, the lows, the things that make you want to scream or dance or sob into the wallpaper, all smoothed into one long citrus-scented exhale. You ask your neighbor, a mother of 3, how she's doing. She says, they've been quiet lately. I suppose that's a blessing. Her voice doesn't rise or fall. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. One of her kids walks past wearing socks on his hands and a vacant stare. She doesn't react. Even the newspapers reflect the mood. Headlines read like gentle nudges. Markets wobble, but that's okay. Dust storm approaches. probably fine. Nation remains calm, despite everything. You miss the days when people got riled up about things, when anger felt like a tool instead of a symptom. You start to wonder what people would do without it. Not the soda, but the feeling it gives, that weightless drift, that quiet float above the sharp rocks of reality. Would they scream? Would they fight? Would they finally process everything they've been swallowing for years? Or would they just reach for another bottle? You watch a preacher pause mid-sermon to take a sip. He exhales and says, "The Lord is my shepherd," like it's a lullaby. No fire, no brimstone, just gentle theological sedation. You talk to a man who hasn't gone a day without 7, up in 4 years. He says it helps with the noise. You ask what noise, and he blinks like he forgot. Then he smiles and says, "Never mind, it's quiet now." And that's the thing. It is quiet, too quiet. You don't remember the last time someone shouted in public, or danced in the street, or cried on the front porch at night, while the neighbors respectfully pretended not to hear. You start to wonder if this is what peace feels like, or just numbness dressed up in a green bottle. You take a sip yourself. The bubbles tickle your tongue. The flavor is crisp, clean, gentle. And for the rest of the afternoon, you forget what you were worried about. The mud is biblical. Thick, choking, existential mud that climbs up your boots and into your soul. Somewhere in France, you sit in a trench that smells like damp wool, fear, and a decade of bad decisions. Overhead, the world periodically explodes. It's loud, then quiet, then loud again. You're not sure what day it is. Someone says it's Tuesday, but no one's betting money on it. And then somehow, impossibly, there's a bottle of 7-Up. It arrives in a crate marked Morale Supplies, somewhere between a stack of cigarettes and a chocolate bar that expired before the war began. The label's intact. The glass is cold. You pop the cap, and the hiss cuts through the artillery like a hymn. You take a sip. For 3 full seconds, the war pauses. No one says it cures anything. It doesn't stop bullets or rebuild towns. But it does take the sharp edge off the constant hum in your brain that says you might not make it through the week. And in this setting, that counts for a lot. Soon, it's everywhere. Not in great quantities. Not enough to be strategic, but enough to feel like someone back home remembers you're still technically a person. Troops trade for it, hoard it, sip it like holy water. One man calls it liquid mercy. Another just calls it my pre-battle ritual. A third drinks half a bottle before a charge and yells, "Let's take this hill, boys," but gently. You meet a pilot who keeps one in his flight jacket. He drinks it before missions, says it keeps his hands steady. You don't ask if it's the bubbles or the lithium. You already know. Some commanders disapprove. "We need alert men," they say, while nursing their own bottles behind closed tents. One colonel tries to ban it entirely, only to find his inbox mysteriously filled with polite but firm letters from mothers, senators, and one unusually articulate golden retriever. The order is quietly reversed. Back home, the ads adjust. A taste of calm in a world at war. Send him strength and something to sip. Wives and girlfriends buy cases, adding them to care packages like they're sending hope in a bottle. The slogan shifts from refreshment to reassurance. You read a letter from a soldier to his family. He doesn't mention the bombs or the mud or the man next to him who never came back from the latrine. He just writes, "Thank you for the 7-Up." It makes everything feel about 10% less awful. Sometimes, that's enough. In the field hospitals, nurses hand it out with aspirin and gauze. One medic calls it an emotional bandage. Soldiers sip it after surgery, before bad news, during quiet moments between chaos. No one knows exactly what it does, but they know how it feels. And in a time when most feelings are raw and red and feral, something that feels soft, numb, even is a gift. You watch a group of soldiers crouched behind sandbags, passing around a single bottle like it's contraband. They each take a sip and stare into the dark. One hums a tune. Another leans his head back and closes his eyes. For a few moments, they're not killing or running or trying not to die. They're just being. Peace in a bottle, or at least a decent imitation. You wonder what happens when they go home. Whether they'll need the soda more or less. Whether they'll remember it as comfort or crutch. Whether the quiet it offers will still feel welcome in a world that's supposed to start moving again. You finish your bottle. Wipe your mouth on your sleeve. A whistle blows in the distance. Boots shuffle in mud. Somewhere, something explodes. But for the first time today, your shoulders aren't clenched. Your heart isn't racing. Your thoughts are quiet enough to hear yourself breathe. And that counts for something. By 1943, it's not a trend. It's just there. A fixture. Like linoleum or passive-aggressive neighbors. You open the fridge and see a bottle nestled between the milk and yesterday's meatloaf, and you don't think twice. It belongs there, like it always has. The label doesn't scream. It doesn't have to. It knows it's already part of the furniture. The taste of calm, with a citrus twist and just enough lithium to file the sharp edges off your day. It's the sound of dinner being slightly overcooked and nobody minding. It's the clink of glass on glass as your uncle toasts another Tuesday without irony. In your neighborhood, every home has a few bottles stacked in the pantry. Not locked away, not saved for guests, just available. It sits on coffee tables like a polite guest. You watch a toddler toddle over, grab one with both hands, and take a sip mid-crayon session. No one bats an eye. The kid blinks twice, exhales softly, and goes back to coloring the dog green. He's never known a world where fizzy, mood stabilizers aren't child accessible. You see it in schools. Teachers crack open a bottle before arithmetic. Kids swap them like trading cards at recess. This one's colder. Mine still fizzes. One boy insists his helps him spell better. No one argues. Even the PTA meetings have them lined up like offerings at a very chill altar. Someone brings cookies. Someone else brings 7-Up. Someone tries to start a heated debate about playground safety. The room collectively sips and nods in measured unison. Discussion over. You watch a housewife pour a bottle into a crystal glass like she's uncorking wine. It's 10A. Him. Her lipstick doesn't smudge. Her gaze is steady. It takes the edge off folding socks, she says, and you believe her. The socks look aggressively soft. The radio hums in the background, casually announcing troop movements and national inflation. The announcer pauses for a word from the sponsor. 7-Up, for when the world gets loud. You sip, and the world gets quiet again. Even pets seem calmer. A cat sleeps in a patch of sunlight. A dog doesn't bark at the mailman. The hamster, usually frantic, just sits and contemplates his wheel like a tiny philosopher. You suspect someone's been pouring small amounts of soda into the water bowls. You don't ask. You're too mellow to care. At grocery stores, the bottles form pyramids near the entrance. No need for discounts. People don't need convincing. They grab 2, 3, 6 at a time. It's as instinctive as buying bread, as routine as breathing. You pass a wedding reception where the champagne's been swapped for 7-Up. The bride toasts with a sparkle in her eye and just the faintest lithium sheen on her teeth. The groom laughs too softly to hear, but it looks heartfelt. The guests sway instead of dance. It's enough. You realize you haven't seen anyone cry in weeks, or shout, or passionately argue about anything beyond whether the dog should be allowed on the couch. And even that ends with a mutual sip and a handshake. The weird part isn't that everyone's drinking it. It's that no one thinks it's weird anymore. You overhear a man say, "My granddad drank it every day, said it kept him sane through the war." His friend nods and says, "I give it to my kid before dentist appointments." A third man says nothing, just raises his bottle and smiles. And that's the moment it clicks. This isn't just a soda. It's not even just a habit. It's become a mood, a lifestyle, a subtle rewiring of national personality. It's the new baseline. You finish your drink. The fizz lingers on your tongue, and the quiet seeps into your bones like warm sunlight through curtains. The baby across the room clinks her bottle against yours and giggles. This is normal now. You don't hear the questions at first. They're not shouted from rooftops or printed in bold ink across front pages. They're whispered between coughs in waiting rooms, scribbled in margins of dusty journals, mumbled by doctors as they glance at bottle caps peeking from their own coat pockets. It starts with one man, a doctor, probably a little too curious for his own good. He's old enough to remember a time when medicine came in glass bottles with cork stoppers and poisons were measured in drops. He watches as mothers hand their toddlers bottles of 7, up like pacifiers. Watches as patients stop reporting headaches because they're already sipping something that helps. Something that makes everything quiet. He writes a paper. Nothing dramatic. Just a few observations. Mood shifts. Sedation patterns, subtle personality flattening. He titles it something boring like The Long-Term Neurological Impacts of Lithium Citrate in Commercial Beverages. You suspect it was originally titled Maybe Don't Drug Children with Citrus-Flavored Tranquilizers, but his editor had a frown and a mortgage. No one reads it. Well, someone does, but they skim. They nod vaguely. They say things like, fascinating, and, well, that's something, and then pour themselves a glass of the very thing he's warning about. The paper ends up filed between a study on aggressive chickens and a wartime pamphlet about dental hygiene. Dust settles over it like polite disinterest. Other doctors start noticing things too. A slight sluggishness in reaction times, a certain emotional buffering in their patients. One psychiatrist observes that her patients no longer seem anxious, but they also no longer seem anything. They just smile and wait for their next appointment. She wonders aloud if a nation's soul can be carbonated into submission. But again, no one really pushes, because to push would be to disturb the quiet. And the quiet is nice. You meet a researcher who begins tracking the number of bottles consumed per household. His graphs are clean, precise, vaguely alarming. They show an inverse relationship between 7-up consumption and incidents of public bickering. He presents them at a conference. Half the room nods. The other half is asleep. You hear about a pediatrician who tries to tell a mother her child might be better off without a daily lithium cocktail. The mother blinks. "But he's so well behaved now," she says, and pats the boy's head. The boy smiles like someone who's been told the world is safe and nothing will ever change. It's not creepy, just unsettling in a way you can't quite name. Even the soda company gets wind of the mutterings. Internally, they start tossing around words like adjustment and public sentiment and optics, but no one's pulling any bottles yet. There's too much comfort floating in those bubbles. Too much gentle compliance. You talk to one of the paper-writing doctors over lunch. He shrugs, says he did what he could, says the data's all there, if anyone wants to look. Then he opens a bottle of 7-up and takes a sip. You raise an eyebrow. He catches it, chuckles, and says, "It helps with the stress." You nod slowly, because of course it does. That's the problem. It's working. And when something works this well, when it smooths out all the worry, the fuss, the discomfort of being alive, people don't tend to ask too many questions, not loudly anyway. So the papers get written, the warnings get filed, the eyebrows get raised, but none of it sticks. The questions evaporate in the fizz, the tension dissolves before it can gather weight, and somewhere, in a small office full of dusty folders and ignored studies, another doctor closes his notebook, stares out the window, and wonders if anyone will ever care enough to listen. Then he sighs, opens a bottle, and everything feels fine again. You're standing in a supermarket aisle that smells like floor wax and quiet resignation, staring at a poster featuring a cheerful cartoon lemon doing yoga. Above it, in radiant bubble letters, lithiated for balance. It's unclear whether the balance refers to pH, chakras, or a very specific kind of emotional numbness. But either way, it's working. The lemon is glowing. You feel oddly jealous of its inner peace. You overhear a clerk explaining to a customer that lithium is technically a salt, which, by the logic of the 1,940 seconds, makes it adjacent to health food. Like sea salt, he says, smiling, but for your brain. The customer nods with the conviction of someone who still thinks radium face cream was just misunderstood. It gets worse. A woman in a floral dress tells her bridge club that 7-Up is full of electrolytes. She says this with the kind of confidence normally reserved for weather forecasts and biblical prophecy. One of the ladies squints at her glass, as if trying to see the ions swirling inside. She takes a sip and declares her mood wonderfully stable. Everyone applauds. You try to argue. You start to say the words psychiatric medication and neurochemical consequences, but they catch in your throat like they've been carbonated too. All that comes out is a polite cough. You attempt again with clinical oversight and chronic exposure, but by then someone's offered you a cold bottle and you're holding it before you even realize. It's open. You're sipping. The fizz coats your tongue like an apology. You stop talking. The marketing campaign goes full throttle. They stop calling it lithium. It's natural mineral essence now, from the earth, for your nerves. There's a new ad showing a family hiking through an alpine meadow, each holding a bottle of 7-Up like it's a canteen of serenity. The dad points to a distant mountain and says something like, "That's where balance comes from." The kids nod, deeply moved. You wonder if the mountain is made entirely of mood stabilizers. A pamphlet arrives in your mailbox with the headline, "Science supports it," followed by a diagram of the periodic table, where lithium is circled in red and labeled mood salt. You flip it over. On the back is a testimonial from a woman who says her migraines, marital tension, and intrusive thoughts all vanished after switching to a more naturally aligned refreshment. She's holding a bottle like it's communion. At a dinner party, someone announces they've replaced their vitamins with 7-Up. It just makes sense, they say, as if they've cracked the code to human physiology. Why take a dozen pills when one bottle gives you clarity, calm, and a nice citrus zip? You watch everyone nod like bobbleheads gently vibrating under the hum of a refrigerator. You wonder when this became normal. When did "contains lithium" become a selling point? When did people start listing it between vitamin C and sunshine? When did the language shift from concern to comfort? You catch a radio ad that says, "It's not a drug, it's a mineral supplement." You briefly black out from secondhand denial. When you come to, the ad is still going, naturally occurring. It says, "Doctor recommended." You imagine a doctor recommending it mid-sip, then patting the patient's hand and murmuring, "There now. Isn't that better?" You try to scream, but you're too hydrated, and too balanced, and too okay with everything. The worst part is, the campaign works. People believe it, not because it's true, but because it feels comforting. It's easier to accept that you're drinking health than to consider the alternative, that your daily beverage might be gently rewiring your frontal lobe. So you take another sip, and the fear softens, and the question fades, and the whisper in your brain saying, "This isn't right," quiets to a hum, just soft enough to ignore. You step into a corner drugstore that doesn't sell drugs anymore, just aisles of promises in bottles. The shelves hum with glass and sugar and a casual disregard for medical boundaries. You stand between two titans, Coca-Cola and 7-Up, each offering their own take on pharmaceutical optimism, neatly carbonated. To your left, Coke. In its original form, this was not just a soda. It was an experience, a brisk slap to the senses, A little pick-me-up in the form of actual pharmaceutical-grade cocaine. Not a metaphor, not a dash of flavor, not an extract. Cocaine. Straight from the coca leaf to your bloodstream, no questions asked. You could walk into a shop, order a glass, and within minutes feel like you'd just solved math. To your right, 7-Up, the mood stabilizer in a bow tie. Lithium citrate swimming gently beneath a lemon-lime disguise, asking nothing in return but your long-term neural chemistry. A beverage designed not to wake you up, but to make you stop caring that you're tired in the first place. And you begin to see it. The great American pendulum, swinging wildly between high-octane mania and bathwater serenity. The sugar, the salt, the fizz, the drugs, all packed into cheerful branding and glass bottles that clink like promises whispered through a smile. You take a step back and realize this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a trend. There was a moment, a very real, very unhinged sliver of time where you could down a lithium-spiked 7, up to even out your mood, then chase it with a cocaine-laced Coca-Cola to climb directly into orbit. And no one stopped you. No one even blinked. The pharmacist probably gave you a wink and said something cheerful about balancing your humors. You picture it. A factory worker in 1931 drinks a 7, up on break, feels the world smooth out, then clocks out, heads home, cracks open a Coke to power through dinner and a bit of aggressive whittling. It's not addiction. It's just hydration with flair. And the industry loved it. Because these weren't sold as indulgences. They were sold as solutions. Feeling low? Take some Coke. Feeling too much? Try 7-Up. Sad, angry, overstimulated, underwhelmed. There was a bottle for that. There were slogans that promised relief, clarity, joy. Some even hinted at moral improvement, as if carbonation could make you a better citizen. Doctors looked at the labels and nodded. Advertisers leaned in and whispered directly into America's subconscious. Parents handed it to children like vitamins. No one thought to ask what might happen if you stacked these substances over weeks, months, years. Because in the moment, it worked. You start to understand that the real madness wasn't the presence of cocaine or lithium. It was the fact that people didn't see them as drugs. They were just ingredients, like cinnamon, like water, like hope. Somewhere along the way, someone must have realized. A nervous executive, maybe. A scientist who actually read the periodic table. Someone must have stared into a bubbling glass and said, "Wait, should we be drinking our personality management?" But by then, the money was already printed, and the ads were already in Sunday papers. And here's the thing. It wasn't even hidden. It wasn't a secret formula locked in a vault. It was printed, right there, on the bottle. Lithiated. Coca. No one flinched. No exposés. No lawsuits. Just a satisfied shrug and another sip. You start to laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you realize how quietly insane it all was. How confidently the American beverage industry turned neural stimulation and chemical sedation into lifestyle accessories. You stare at the bottles. Two glistening icons of emotional self-regulation, sold for a nickel each. You feel like you're standing in the middle of a pharmacy run by circus clowns, somewhere between euphoria and complete stillness. And you realize, this wasn't medicine. This was customer service. It starts with a memo. Typed on a typewriter that sounds vaguely annoyed to be working. It makes its way through a smoky office in Washington, D.C., where a man in a wrinkled suit and a permanent squint squints harder. The paper reads something dangerously rational like potential neurochemical side effects of lithium citrate in consumer beverages. You feel the tremor of bureaucracy stretching after a long nap. It's 1948. And someone in a government building has finally asked, should we be putting psychiatric salts in soda? Not in an outraged, alarm bell ringing sort of way. More like the way someone might ask if it's okay to keep a lizard in the fridge. curious, slightly disturbed, but not enough to get up. The report is small, 10 pages, half of them footnotes, a few charts, a recommendation that maybe, just maybe, someone should look into this further. It doesn't accuse anyone. It doesn't ban anything. It doesn't even suggest removing lithium. It just places the idea on the table like a wilted sandwich at a potluck no one asked to attend. But the air shifts. Something is different. Not louder, just less quiet. You start noticing questions sneaking into places where before there were only slogans. A chemistry professor raises a hand during a conference and gets a room full of stares. A health columnist writes a short piece titled, "What's in your soda?" and the editor sticks it between a meatloaf recipe and an ad for asbestos tiles. You feel it in the soda itself, like it knows. The fizz seems more hesitant. The label doesn't shine the same way. Even the ads start backing off. Just a little. The lemon-lime cartoon mascot that used to dance around your serotonin now stands still, smiling with its hands behind its back, like it's hiding something. And the company? The company feels it too. They don't panic. They adjust. A new internal memo circulates with the words optics and reformulation, and let's not call it lithium, please. Meetings are held where men in suits discuss public mood while sipping the very product they're quietly trying to distance from. One of them jokes, maybe we should just sell it as a tranquilizer. Everyone laughs and then immediately stops. But change is slow. It's not a firestorm. It's a drizzle, a sluggish, reluctant acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, soda shouldn't double as mood medication. The regulators aren't storming in. They're politely knocking, occasionally asking to see the ingredient list. You get the feeling that if the FDA had a motto at this time, it would be something like, let's all just be cool. And everyone is still cool. Too cool. Because they're still drinking it. Even as the whispers grow, people keep sipping. Bottles still clink on porches. Families still smile in ads. Children still clutch their 7-Ups, like toys that tingle. Nothing explodes. No lawsuits. No screaming headlines. Just a gentle pressure building beneath the surface, like carbonation in a bottle that's been shaken one too many times. You watch it all unfold from your usual booth at the diner. The waitress refills your glass without asking. You don't stop her. The soda hits your tongue, and for a moment you forget there's a man in Washington somewhere, blinking at a chart labeled cumulative dosage over time. But the calm doesn't feel quite the same. It's still there, but it's thinner now, like a blanket stretched too far. You start to hear things again, distant voices, buried doubts. They were always there. You just didn't notice them under the hiss and sparkle of chemical stillness. The mood is shifting. Not fast, not loud, but definitely shifting. You check the date on the newspaper, 1949. The world has survived another war, invented microwaves, and somehow still thinks radium is chic in watches. And yet here you are, realizing with a slow blink that for the past 2 decades, your favorite soda has doubled as a personality leash. You stir your coffee absently before remembering it's not coffee you usually drink. It's 7-Up. It's always been 7-Up. Morning, noon, after dinner. You used to think. You liked the taste. Now you're not sure if you ever actually had a choice in the matter. The flavor's fine, but it's the emotional cushion that kept you coming back like a hug from someone who doesn't ask how your day went. Just hands you a lemon-lime bottle and tells your brain to take 5. And for 20 years, nobody questioned it. No Senate hearings, no dramatic exposés, no disapproving headlines with black and white photos of wide-eyed children holding glass bottles like they're cradling tiny, carbonated secrets. It's like the entire country hit snooze in 1929 and never quite got around to waking up. You start mentally flipping through old newspapers, trying to remember a single letter to the editor that used the words mood-altering substance and soda fountain in the same sentence. Nothing. Not even a mild, polite inquiry from someone in a cardigan who writes in cursive. You think about the lawsuits that could have happened, the class actions, the tearful court testimonies, the dramatic evidence. Exhibit A, a vintage green bottle. Exhibit B, a nation full of citizens who couldn't tell if they were calm or just chemically pacified. But none of that happened. People didn't ask questions because the product didn't scream. It whispered. It didn't knock you down, it just tucked you in. Every dose was so mild, so pleasantly numbing, that no one ever thought to push back. It didn't ruin lives, it just gently rearranged them. Besides, it was advertised next to toothpaste. How dangerous could it be? You picture a 1,937 kitchen, mother humming while packing lunches, a bottle of 7, up nestled between the ham sandwich and the apple, as if citrus and lithium belong together like peanut butter and jelly. The child sips it during recess, punches no one, and gets praised for finally settling down. Mom beams. The teacher nods. Everyone wins. No one wonders why. And the marketing? Still a masterpiece in sleight of hand. Natural. Refreshing. Soothes the nerves. You think of the slogans now and realize they weren't just clever, they were technically accurate. But in the same way, a tranquilizer dart is relaxing. So why did it take this long? Why didn't anyone sound the alarm in 1935 or 1942? Or during that brief period in 1946 when America had a national mood swing and still thought it was due to weather? The truth sits uncomfortably in your chest. Because nobody wanted to. Everyone was tired. Of the wars, of the dust, of the noise and the lines and the mail that came too late. The drink worked. It didn't ask anything of you. Just whispered, "Shh, it's fine," and gave you a way to survive another gray Tuesday. So no, there weren't protests. There weren't whistleblowers or riots in the streets. Just a long, slow sigh disguised as a beverage, and an entire country too mellow to complain. You twist the cap and hear the usual hiss, but this one feels different. Not sharp, not muted, just off. You take a sip and wait for the soft slide of contentment, the familiar mental fog that flattens your anxieties into a polite background hum. But it doesn't come. Instead, you taste lemon, lime, bubbles, and something unnervingly close to clarity. You look at the bottle like it's betrayed you. The label still smiles. The glass still sweats. But the feeling is gone, or at least dialed down to a level where you can hear yourself think, which is not the gift you were hoping for. Something has changed. There's no press release, no newspaper article, no billboard that reads, "Now with 100% less pharmacological sedation." The company doesn't admit anything. It just quietly shifts. Like a magician palming a card, hoping no one notices the trick has ended and the real world is leaking back in. You start noticing it elsewhere. At work, people fidget again. Arguments at the dinner table take a few more seconds to diffuse. A child in a corner. Store throws a tantrum over a candy bar, and no one even considers handing him a bottle of 7-Up. You watch the mother reach for it, pause, and grab milk instead. Something inside you stirs some long-forgotten capacity for discomfort. The worst part is the slow realization that you had been floating for years, and now gravity is quietly reclaiming you. You ask a clerk if the formula changed. He shrugs and says maybe they made it less salty. You want to grab him by the collar and scream, "Less salty? That salt was holding me together." But instead, you nod and walk away, holding your slightly disappointing beverage and wondering how many parts of yourself were actually you. You notice that people seem more awake, not necessarily better, just more alert. The city has more arguments. The diner plays the radio slightly louder. Your neighbor mows his lawn 3 times in a week, and no one calls it excessive. One afternoon, you overhear 2 pharmacists talking in line at the post office. One mutters something about lithium being phased out, and the other replies, "It was about time." You want to ask them when it started, who decided, whether anyone asked for it, but you don't. You just buy your stamps and leave, gripping your bottle like it still means something. Then comes the ache. It isn't painful, not really. Just a dull awareness that you've been slightly sedated for 2 decades, and now your brain has to do its own heavy lifting again. You feel emotions reintroducing themselves like guests returning to a party you forgot you were hosting. Joy, yes, but also boredom, anxiety, that strange flavor of existential dread that tastes a bit like unpaid bills and faint jazz. You think maybe this is what sober people feel like. Maybe this is what reality was always supposed to feel like. You keep drinking it anyway, out of habit, out of hope. Maybe the next bottle will feel like the old ones. Maybe this batch was just a fluke. But deep down, you know the spell is broken. The fizz remains, but the magic has gone flat. You stare at the label again. Same logo, same smile, same promise of refreshment. But now it feels like a stranger pretending to remember your birthday, polite, vaguely familiar, and completely hollow. You take another sip. It's fine, but it's not what it used to be. You crack open another bottle, hoping maybe this one will hit. Maybe it's just your brain playing tricks. Maybe the last batch was off, or your mood was weird, or Mercury was in retrograde again, assuming you even know what that means. But it's not any of that. You take a sip, and it's cold, it's carbonated, it's lemon lime, and it's deeply underwhelming. The fizz is still there. The pop, the glass, the soft hiss. When you twist the cap, it all looks the same. But you don't feel it anymore. That subtle hum beneath your skin, that cozy quiet that used to wrap around your nervous system like a weighted blanket dipped in. Sunshine, gone. You sit on your porch and watch a man parallel park badly across the street. He reverses, inches forward, reverses again. You used to find this mildly charming. Now you kind of want to key his car. It dawns on you, not slowly, but with the dull smack of forgotten noise, that you are irritated. Genuinely, vividly, audibly irritated. And not just you. The whole neighborhood seems to be waking up with the emotional equivalent of a neck cramp. You hear a woman yell at her dog for the first time in 6 years. 2 teens get into a full-on shouting match over a bicycle. A man mutters something obscene under his breath when his newspaper lands on the wet part of the lawn. For the first time in a generation, Americans are beginning to feel things they can't sip away. They never changed the label, never updated the slogan, never added a footnote that read, "Now with 100% fewer mood-stabilizing minerals." The bottles still wink at you from soda machines and diners, pretending nothing's different, but it is. You can tell. Your body can tell. It's like meeting an old friend whose voice has changed. The words are the same, but the music is gone. The commercials keep running. Happy families, ice clinking, laughter echoing off sun-drenched porches. But now it feels like a lie, or a memory you're not sure you lived. You start noticing how hard everyone is trying, how forced the smiles look, how none of the actors blink long enough to process the full weight of existence anymore. It's all performance. There's no calm undercurrent anymore, just caffeine and blind optimism. Road rage shows up like it's been waiting in the wings. Minor fender benders turn into full-blown arguments. A man at a gas station throws a hot dog. Children throw tantrums in the middle of Woolworths, and no one tries to pacify them with soda because it doesn't work. Because now it's just soda. You sit in a diner and watch 2 elderly men argue about baseball with a kind of passionate fury that feels both ancient and new. You realize this is how it used to be, before the bottle, before the fizz, before the lithium, back when people just felt things and yelled them across tables without a chemical filter. You glance at the bottle beside your burger. It's sweating prettily in the afternoon light. It looks like nostalgia. It tastes like a broken promise. You drink it anyway, not because you think it will help, but because the motion is familiar. The ritual is soothing, and there's something comforting about pretending, just for a second, that nothing ever changed. That maybe, deep inside that lemon-lime fizz, there's still a whisper of the quiet. There isn't, but you finish the bottle anyway. It starts with the sighs, the long, winded kind that linger in living rooms and train stations, trailing off like someone forgetting why they walked into a room. You notice them everywhere. In the diner booth behind you, in line at the post office, even your mailman sighs now audibly while holding nothing but coupons and mild disappointment. The nation is once again feeling something, but no one dares name it. You hear someone blame the humidity. It's always the humidity, or the wind, or Mercury, or Tuesdays, or the way Doris at the bank chews her gum like it owes her money. Everything becomes a scapegoat, as long as it isn't the lemon-lime ghost of emotional regulation that just quietly vanished from shelves. You sit on a front porch with your neighbor, a man who once described himself as tranquil as a cat in a sunbeam. He's chewing a toothpick like it's a grudge. He doesn't say much anymore, and when he does, it's mostly about how things used to be better before the air changed. You ask what he means. He squints at the horizon and mutters something about barometric pressure. You both sip your sodas and pretend not to notice the fizz doesn't carry the same weight it used to. It fizzes, yes, but it doesn't calm. It doesn't glide through your bloodstream like a whispered lullaby. It just fizzes. Loud, sharp, empty, a balloon of static. At work, people start snapping more. Not violently, not yet. But the little things grow teeth. A missed comma in a memo. A lukewarm coffee. Someone breathing with just a bit too much nose. You hear a man mutter "unbelievable" at a stapler jam and realize you haven't heard that tone in 20 years. The undertone of actual frustration. It's jarring. Nobody blames the drink. They blame allergies, cosmic imbalance, the Democrats, the Republicans, something called toxic ions, and the moon. One man at a barbecue swears the moon has been too close lately. You nod, not because you agree, but because it's easier than saying, "They took the lithium out, and now I feel the crushing weight of existence again." Because saying that out loud would sound crazy. But quietly, somewhere deep in your frontal cortex, the pieces start shifting. The mood swings, the tears during radio jingles, the deep dread that shows up uninvited at 3 p.m. on a perfectly nice day. You know it's not pollen. It's not the rising price of eggs. It's not even the fact that socks never come out of the dryer as pairs anymore. It's the drink, or rather, the absence of it. You look around and wonder if anyone else has figured it out, but no one talks about it, because no one wants to sound ungrateful. We still have the soda. We still have the commercials, the jingles, the smiling kids, the baseball games and ice cream socials. The illusion holds, barely, like a stage backdrop, flapping in a breeze. A woman at the grocery store yells at a bag boy for bruising her bananas. Another man throws a small tantrum when he can't find parking within divine right distance of the entrance. Children cry again, not the gentle, sleepy whimpers of the Lithium years, but real, guttural, world-is-ending sobs. It's like someone flipped the emotional circuit, breakers back on. You sip a 7, up and stare into the middle distance. It tastes the same, which is somehow worse. You wish it had changed flavors too, something drastic, like pickle or despair, so you'd know it was different. But it's still lemon lime, still bubbly, still cheerful on the label, like a party you're not invited to anymore. Someone bumps into you and mutters an apology that sounds more like a threat. You nod again. Not because it's okay, but because reacting feels like too much work now. You're tired, not sleepy tired, just soul tired. You blame the clouds, so does everyone else. You open a magazine and see the new ad. Bright green, clean font. No mention of chemistry or calm or anything remotely pharmaceutical. Just a smiling woman holding a glass bottle near her cheek, eyes closed like she's in love. The slogan reads, "You like the taste." You stare at it for a long time. That's it. No explanation. No nod to the last 20 years of national sedation. No quiet confession of, "Hey, remember when we put psychiatric stabilizers in your soft drink?" Nothing. Just a blanket of lemon-lime cheerfulness spread neatly over 2 decades of collective chemical amnesia. You flip through the rest of the magazine, half expecting to find a small apology tucked between the cigarette ads and Miracle Wrinkle Cream. Instead, you get a recipe for lime gelatin and a crossword puzzle. The clue for 7 across is bubbly drink. You pencil in 7-Up and feel complicit. The company moves fast. The word lithiated disappears from every label, every sign, every crate. Factory workers peel it off delivery trucks with razors. Stores get new posters overnight, as if by dawn, the past will have politely dissolved. You drive past a billboard that once bragged about refreshing the mind and steadying the nerves. It's been replaced with a picture of a lemon and the word zest. You know what's happened, but you can't prove it. No one talks about it. No one wants to. When you mention it to your neighbor, she squints like you're bringing up a dream she half remembers but doesn't want to examine. "Did it ever really have that stuff in it?" she asks. You nod. She frowns. "Huh. Weird." Then she changes the subject to her begonias. In diners, the servers still pour it over chipped ice, still smile when they set it down. The sound of the fizz is the same, but the silence afterward feels heavier now. It's not calm anymore, it's avoidance. You drink, and the bubbles bite your tongue like they're mocking you. You try to taste the old magic, that gentle fog, but all you get is citrus and memory. The company releases new commercials, all sunshine and laughter, promising crisp refreshment and a taste everyone can agree on. You watch one late at night and feel your skin crawl. The tone is desperate in a way only denial can be. You wonder if the marketing team sits in a boardroom pretending they don't remember either. Maybe they drank too much of their own product and forgot how to feel shame. They call it progress, a modern formula for a modern world, and you almost believe them until you realize that every bottle looks exactly the same as before. Same logo, same green glass, same lazy tilt of the 7. The only thing missing is the thing that made you not care. It's strange how fast collective memory erodes when there's money to be made. You start noticing it everywhere, old ads quietly disappearing from archives, scientific articles misplaced in libraries, journalists who suddenly have no comment. The phrase, bib label lithiated lemon lime soda, fades from conversation like an awkward joke no one wants to claim ownership of. You meet an old pharmacist who remembers the early days. He lowers his voice like he's confessing to a crime. "We used to sell it as a tonic," he says. "People swore by it, said it made them calm." You ask if he knew what was in it. He nods. Of course, but nobody cared. It was legal. Then he smiles, but it's the kind of smile people use to bury a thought. You go home and open your fridge. The new bottles sit there, perfectly ordinary, sweating under the light. You take one out, twist the cap, and take a long drink. It's cold, it's bright, it's aggressively cheerful, and yet, as you swallow, you can't help but feel like something's missing, not just from the formula, but from you. The ad on the radio chirps again. You like the taste. You whisper to yourself, "I liked the calm." You sit in your kitchen, staring at a bottle that once changed the way your neurons communicated. Now it just looks like soda. The fizz still pops. The lemon-lime smell still hovers in the air like a ghost that refuses to admit it died. But the bite's gone. The peace is gone. The little glass therapist in your fridge has been defanged. Then, like a hungover government emerging from a decades-long nap. The FDA shows up with a clipboard. It's 1,950. You hear the words, "New regulations," float through the radio like an apology from someone who forgot your birthday 3 years in a row. You squint at the newsprint. Labels, dosage limits, and disclosures. It's all very official and very late. They hold press conferences with stern faces and words like oversight and public trust, but their voices shake, like someone trying to discipline a dog that already chewed through the sofa. You picture a man in Washington realizing that the beverage industry has been playing pharmacologist with no medical license, then quietly removing his glasses and muttering, "Oh no, you want to feel vindicated." But it's hard when the damage was done in pastel-colored bottles with twist-off tops. The rules they're writing now feel like a joke in a language no one speaks anymore. Yes, we'll make them list the ingredients. Yes, we'll test the safety of additives. But where were they? When your 5-year-old niece started doing interpretive dance in the yard because she drank 3 bottles of emotional anesthesia at a birthday party? The new ingredient guidelines read like an awkward truce. Some artificial colors are fine, some natural ones are suspect. Sugar is everywhere, but in moderation it's patriotic. And lithium? Not exactly banned, just not encouraged. Like dating your cousin. You attend a town hall where a woman stands up and asks why no one told her that her favorite soda had psychiatric effects. The official responds by clearing his throat and referring her to archival materials. You imagine those materials being quietly burned behind the building. Still, the new rules roll in. Labels grow longer. Bottles start listing things like citric acid and natural flavors, with asterisks that lead nowhere. There's an odd comfort in the bureaucracy of it all. At least someone's pretending to care. You even catch a whisper of a lawsuit, but it vanishes under a pile of paperwork and polite settlements. You see a billboard one day that says, "Nothing but refreshment." You laugh out loud, alone in your car. It sounds like someone trying to rewrite your past by editing a diary you didn't know you were keeping. Your body remembers, though. It remembers the ease, the soft edge to every sharp moment, the way stress used to slide off your back like water on wax. You sip a 7. Up now and feel only bubbles, and the creeping awareness of being alive again. It's exhausting. Meanwhile, the FDA pats itself on the back for taking a stand. They say things like, "We're making progress, and transparency is key." You nod slowly, holding a bottle that now feels more like a prop than a product. The fizz is still there, but it doesn't do what it used to. You miss not caring. A reporter calls the new regulations a turning point in public health. You call it a very fancy lock on a barn that now contains only hay and some vague embarrassment. You sit with a friend on a hot afternoon. They hand you a 7. Up, chilled and sweating in the sun. You clink bottles and take a sip. The taste is fine. The vibe is gone. And somewhere, the FDA quietly drafts another memo, hoping no one asks what took so long. You stand in a pharmacy, fluorescent lights buzzing above like the judgmental hum of modernity. There's a man behind the counter, white coat, name tag, a look that says he's seen things mostly seasonal allergies and controlled substances. You glance at the little orange bottle in his hand. Lithium. Not the bubbly kind. The kind that comes with a child-proof cap and a warning label that includes the phrase, renal function monitoring. You blink. Hard. It used to come in glass bottles, with cheerful fonts and smiling cartoon lemons. It used to sit in vending machines next to root beer and grape soda, not locked in a cabinet behind bulletproof glass. Now, it's a regulated substance, a controlled mood, a government-certified vibe. You flash back to 1932, when you could walk into a corner store with a nickel and walk out holding an emotional lobotomy disguised as refreshment. Back then, the only label it had was a paper ring around the neck that said something vague like healthful tonic or good for digestion. There were no dosage limits, no doctor consultations, no side effects other than an unusual calm during family arguments. But now you need a diagnosis to access what was once a staple of your childhood. You hear someone at the counter asking if this dose is therapeutic or just mood leveling, and you feel like you've entered a universe where the punchline arrived 30 years late. You turn the prescription bottle over in your hand, half expecting to see the old 7-Up logo on the bottom. You don't. Just barcodes and numbers and a name you barely recognize as yours. Your doctor had said it with a straight face. It's the same compound that used to be in soda, but this is more precise, safer. You nodded, but you were already picturing Charles Leiper Grigg ladling lithium citrate into a soda vat like a bartender at the end of a very long week. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like paperwork. You go home, open the fridge, and stare at a can of modern 7-Up. It glows with artificial cheer. Crisp, clean, refreshing, it promises. You crack it open. It hisses the way it always has. You sip. There's lemon, there's lime, there's carbonation, but there's no feeling. No subtle neurological recalibration. No whisper of serenity threading through your spine. You place it next to the orange pill bottle. They look like enemies from different timelines. One, a relic of marketing hubris. The other, a byproduct of institutional course correction. You wonder how many other countries quietly drank their way through decades of mood management. You wonder if they still do. At dinner, someone says they're feeling anxious and jokes, that they need a drink. You watch them pour vodka into Sprite. You think about saying something but don't. The moment passes. Everyone laughs. No one remembers. You do, though. You remember when emotions came in six-packs, when mothers handed toddlers sippy cups full of subtle sedation, when barbers, teachers, and postmen were all riding a gentle wave of enforced neutrality. You remember the quiet, the calm, the absence of sharp corners in your brain. You remember feeling okay for no reason at all. Now, Lithium is behind a counter, accessible only through diagnosis and copay. Now, emotions are yours to deal with. Raw, loud, complicated. You sigh, open the bottle, and swallow a single, regulated dose. It kicks in slowly, predictably, clinically. It's not the same, but it's close enough. They're adults now, mostly, somewhere in the suburbs, or downtown, or the part of town where everything is a yoga studio and nobody has cried since 1986. You pass them on sidewalks. They smile, but it doesn't always reach their eyes. You wonder if they even blink normally. There's a stillness to them, a gentle hum instead of a heartbeat. Like maybe they were raised in soft lighting and ambient jazz. These were the kids who got 7-Up in their lunchboxes, not as a treat, as a routine. One thermos of soup, one sandwich, one lemon-lime lithium delivery system. Their tantrums didn't escalate. They flatlined. No screaming, no fits, just thoughtful sighs and an unusual fondness for beige. And now, they function. Mostly. They go to work. They maintain eye contact just long enough. They answer emails like they're composing haikus. "Thank you for the update," they type, with all the intensity of a man watching grass grow. You try to picture one of them in a fight. You can't. The most violent thing they've done recently is remove someone from a group text. You meet one at a party. She tells you she was born in 35. She says it, like someone might say they survived a mild natural disaster. She remembers playing hopscotch, then taking breaks to sip her calm juice. She says her mother thought it was medicine, and her father thought it was a miracle. She didn't think much of it. She just stopped crying somewhere around age 5 and never really started again. You ask how she feels about it now. She tilts her head, considering, like you just asked her to define the color blue. "I suppose it helped me focus," she says. I don't remember feeling much at all, which, looking back, might have been the point. You nod slowly, then ask if she ever stopped drinking it. She laughs once short, sharp, a noise without joy. They took it out before I noticed, she says. I was 12. One day it just didn't work anymore. I cried for 4 hours straight over a math test. My parents thought I'd broken. She excuses herself to get more wine. You watch her walk away and wonder if her heart rate ever went above resting again. At the grocery store, you see one standing frozen in front of the sparkling water. He's in his 40s now, khakis pressed, eyes vacant, like the soda aisle just triggered a deeply buried neural pathway. He grabs a Sprite, studies the label, then puts it back. You catch his eyes. There's a flicker. Recognition? Panic? Hard to say. You realize this whole cohort just slid into adulthood without processing most of their childhood. They didn't rebel. They reorganized their sock drawers. They didn't scream into pillows. They journaled, without emotion, about how screaming might feel. They grew up with feelings so thoroughly muffled they became ambient noise, and now they lead meetings, coach t-ball, file taxes early. They're functional, crisp, polite, slightly off. You hear one of them say, "I'm just not really an angry person." You believe them, not because they've mastered self-control, but because the part of them that should get angry was chemically wrapped in a bubble bath at age 4 and never fully recovered. You sip your coffee and realize you envy them, just a little, not because they're happier, but because they seem immune to existential spirals and inconvenient crying. You spiral weekly. They do crosswords. Maybe they're fine, maybe they're haunted. Hard to tell. They'd never say either way. You live in a country that, for a brief moment, decides the human psyche can be solved with carbonation and a pinch of periodic table. There are no warning labels, no ethics boards, no hesitant pauses, just a blindfolded leap into the glowing arms of chemistry, because if the lab coats say it's fine, and it sparkles, it must be salvation. You're watching the national mood be rebranded and sold in 6-packs. It's not therapy, it's bubbles. Not coping, but lemon-lime alchemy with a lithium twist. Sadness becomes less of a condition and more of a scheduling inconvenience. You hear phrases like modern miracle and science in a bottle from men with side parts and unchecked egos. They talk fast, pat each other on the back, and hand you a drink that makes your brain hum like a refrigerator. Everything becomes smoother, less jagged, less real. You're told emotion is just imbalance, that if your soul feels heavy, it's because you're missing something, a mineral, a molecule, a man-made fix. You don't question it. No one does. Why would you, when it's easier to sip your way to contentment than scream into the void? You're part of a generation that sees sadness not as a teacher, but as a bug in the system, something to patch, something to override. There's a sense of wide-eyed wonder to it all, like a child building a rocket ship out of kitchen knives and enthusiasm. The country doesn't just believe it can bottle joy. It believes it can mass-produce it, ship it nationwide, and make it shelf-stable. You sit in a diner. The server offers you hope with a bendy straw, and you drink it. Because why? Wouldn't you? It's 1,940-something, and nothing is sacred except progress. You're not asking how it works. You're asking how soon it'll be available in vending machines. The faith isn't just in the drink. It's in the whole idea that the chaos inside you can be flattened with enough fizz and a dash of pharmacology. You watch as that faith spreads, one sip at a time. Housewives add it to punch bowls. Factory workers pop caps on break. Kids sip it like it's juice, except their juice gently massages their prefrontal cortex into submission. No one stops to think this might be too easy. That mood should require effort. that maybe the ache in your chest is trying to tell you something and not just begging for effervescence. But this is the age of chemical answers, of canned clarity and carbonated calm. Sadness gets redesigned as a solvable glitch, not a human truth. There's a pill for nerves, a tonic for melancholy, a soda for spiritual dread. Your emotions are now a menu, and someone in a lab is adding new options monthly. It's glorious and horrifying, because it works just well enough to be seductive. Not perfect, but passable. Enough to get you through work, through dinner, through the moments when the weight of existing might otherwise knock the wind out of you. You start to forget what unfiltered feeling is, what it means to ache without assistance. This is the era of control, of quieting the storm instead of listening to it. You don't wrestle your demons, you dissolve them in liquid form and chase them with crushed ice. You feel stable, which is nice, but also disorienting, because some part of you remembers what it was like to feel things fully, and you're not sure you'd recognize that version of yourself if they walked past you on the street. You take another sip. You smile. You're not sure if it's real, but it's convenient and fizzy, and that seems good enough for now. The sound of the bottle cap hissing open used to mean something. It was like a starter pistol for tranquility. You didn't realize it at the time, nobody did. But the soft PSS was your cue to slip into a gentle lemon-lime haze where existential dread politely waited its turn. You could hear your own thoughts, but they were in a tone that didn't criticize. You miss that. Not in a desperate way, just in the way you miss recess or unconditional optimism. You remember the glass bottles, heavy, cold, vaguely medicinal in their design. You'd crack one open like it was a secret, like you were part of something bigger and vaguely off-label. The bubbles rose slowly, as if in no hurry, which felt appropriate. Everything was slower then, softer. You think about that now, in a world of high fructose aggression and sugar-fueled panic. And something about the stillness back then starts to feel less like nostalgia and more like withdrawal. You sip a modern 7, up and wait for the feeling. It doesn't come. The taste is there, kind of, but it's wearing a costume. It's trying to be what it used to be, but without the mood-altering backbone. Like someone removed the engine from a car and just hoped you wouldn't notice if they pushed it downhill. You notice. Your taste buds notice. Your endocrine system is furious. You sit at your kitchen table and think about how calm used to be easy, how the world had collectively agreed to just chemically round off the edges for a while. It wasn't perfect, but it was quiet. And now everything hums with a low, caffeinated panic. Everyone is too aware, too present. You kind of hate it. You tell yourself it wasn't that big a deal. It was just soda. It was just a phase. But then you remember the way your mind used to exhale, the subtle untensing of your shoulders, the vague sense that everything was fine, or at least fine enough to not scream about. That wasn't flavor. That was something else, something elemental. And now, it's gone. You think about the kids who grew up with it, the teachers who drank it before class, the parents who handed it out like juice boxes with benefits. You wonder if they remember it the way you do, not just as a drink, but as a feeling, a bottled exhale, a socially accepted chemical vacation. Nobody talks about it now, but you know they know. Sometimes you find yourself in the soda aisle, staring at the shelves like you're expecting the past to restock itself. You see the green label, you see the familiar font, but the magic's gone. It's a costume now, a mascot with no mascot energy. You buy one anyway. You keep hoping. You twist the cap. You take a sip. You wait. Nothing. Just sweetness and disappointment. And yet, some part of you still smiles. Because for a moment, just a blink, your brain tries to remember the old script. It searches for that calm, that chemical hush, and it almost finds it, like phantom limb syndrome. But for serenity, you miss it, just a little. which is probably the most concerning part. You're standing in front of the fridge at a gas station, staring through the fingerprint-smudged glass at a row of green bottles that look almost exactly like they did 80 years ago. There's something familiar about them. Same lopsided logo, same confident little red dot, same implication that this is a beverage that knows what it's doing. You know better now, but your hand moves anyway. The bottle feels lighter than it used to, maybe because it's plastic, maybe because it doesn't carry the weight of an entire national mood anymore. Still, the branding works. It whispers to some dormant part of your brain that remembers comfort, simplicity, a cool, crisp nothingness that used to mean everything. You pop the cap. It hisses, but there's no magic in it. Just carbon dioxide doing its job. You take a sip. It's fine. Not good, not bad. Just cold. A little citrusy, vaguely medicinal if you squint your taste buds. It doesn't lift you, doesn't soften your anxiety or smooth out the jagged edges of the day. It doesn't do anything except remind you of what it used to do, which is somehow worse. You remember when it was more than a drink, when it was a prescription without paperwork, a therapy session in 12 ounces, when you could open a bottle and feel your brain whisper, "Ah, finally." That was before you knew what lithium was. Before anyone really cared. You were being gently chemically stabilized, and nobody mentioned it, which felt like a kindness. Now, everyone knows everything. Sugar is the enemy. Sodium is suspicious. Carbonation is a gastrointestinal villain. The bottle in your hand has been stripped of all scandal, all secret power. It's just a beverage now. It wants to sparkle like it used to, but it's missing the soul. You swallow, and your mood doesn't shift. No mellow cloud, no sudden inner stillness, just the realization that you're drinking flavored bubbles and hoping for a miracle. It's not coming. You glance around the store. Everyone's caffeinated and furious. A guy in a Bluetooth headset is yelling into the void about quarterly projections. A woman is sighing in a way that makes the air feel heavier. The cashier looks like he hasn't blinked since 7 a.m. No one is calm, not really, just faking it in high resolution. And you're standing there, emotionally unchanged, with a bottle of missed potential in your hand. You wonder how many people even know. How many realize there was a time when sodas weren't just drinks, but tiny pharmacological experiments. You want to tell the guy with the headset that the fizz used to come with a side of psychological equilibrium, that once upon a time, your entire frontal lobe could be gently swaddled by a lemon-lime fizz, but you don't say anything, because he wouldn't believe you. No one would. The past sounds made up now. You take another sip, hoping maybe the nostalgia will do the work instead. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the memory of a thing is strong enough to fake the feeling. For a second, it almost works. The bubbles pop against your tongue just right, and you swear you can feel the outline of that old piece, like a shadow on the wall where a painting used to hang. But it fades. It always fades. You stare at the label, trying to read between the ingredients. It says natural flavors, but doesn't specify how natural or how helpful. You think back to the original formula to the lithium, the accidental anti-mania in every bottle. It was casual, almost charming. You weren't trying to medicate. You were just thirsty. The fix came as a surprise. Now you're just thirsty. It's strange, remembering something your body felt, but your mind wasn't allowed to process at the time. You felt better. That was the whole point. The nation felt better, smoother, less prone to dramatic outbursts or random acts of emotional combustion. Now, everyone's vibrating with unfiltered thoughts. Social media has replaced sedation. The national vibe is one long, caffeinated scream. You take one more drink. There's nothing left in it but artificial brightness, a cheerful lie in a recyclable bottle. You try to appreciate it for what it is, a relic a reboot, a ghost in soda form. But the taste reminds you of how far things have shifted, not just chemically, but culturally. The optimism's gone. The science no longer promises miracles. It promises disclaimers. You cap the bottle and walk outside into the bright, unmedicated world. You're still thirsty, but now you know why.